Okay, 49 solution. So again, if you see something in this video that, gives you an aha moment, stop and see if you can solve it without watching the whole video. And if you're still stuck, look at the code. All right, so I'll show you how I implemented the protocol in the smallest code possible. And I won't implement all of the CRUD operations in this video because they're pretty repetitive. After you do the first few, then they're all pretty much the same. But you can go look at the Git for the project. You'll see in exercise 52, I put the project on GitHub, and then I do a code review of it, and I go through the whole thing. Okay, so first I set up the data, then the protocol parser, then the handlers. That's a really common pattern. So we got the protocol that I have to implement. Well, I covered this before, and I'm just going to do a little bit of that. I throw in a few other things, but that's pretty much it. Here is the structure that I used. So you'll see me actually, I'll pretty much just copy and paste this, but what you'll see is I have just some bstrings, and then I have this handler callback, and I'll show you what the handler callback looks like, but you know how to do callbacks. We already did that. And then I need a way to store the statistics. Remember, using the statistics from lib learn see the hard way. So I could just give it a name. I'm going to put it into a simple hash map, nothing fancy, and then I have my stats there. All right, my design is really simple. I accept a connection. I parse it into a command. So I use a parsing function that makes me command structures, and then I run a handler on it. That's it. For now, I'm just storing it in the hash map. I don't have to get everything working right away. I just get pieces working at a time. All right, the last thing I would do is add better tests and round out the protocol with more CRUD operations. In the video, I don't do that. I get basic tests going in the interest of time. But you can go get the GitHub project that I set up on the last exercise, and you can see how I evolved the project. I continue to hack on this even after I'm done with the book. Okay, so just getting started. All I want to do really is I'm just adding the protocol. And in a way, this makes the whole server sort of work right away. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it more in a testing-oriented fashion where I'm going to write more of the tests because I know how I want the protocol to work. I have the protocol. I have my end result. So it's easier for me to write a test with the end result and then make the server handle that test. So you'll see how I do that as I work. All right, so right now I'm just reviewing the code that I worked on because I started working on this the next day. So I go back through and I review what I did. Now, I have my notes, and the first thing I got to do is I've got to get this structure in here. So remember, I said do the data first. And I already had it in the slides, so there we go. And I need to have this record too. And remember, I'm going to be passing these command structures around to handler functions. So that's why I have to do those first. And then I'm just going to create a really lame data store. There's not, this becomes a problem later on when I sort of start working on the clients storing things. So you'll see when I do the critique in 52, it'll be important to understand that implication of what I did there. Okay, now I'm just making the data come live. It's just a place for me to store stuff. That's it. It's not important whether it's a hash map or anything like that. It's just a global data thing that I can just store things in. To fix this, I would have just redesigned this so I didn't need to have this global data store. Or use the global data store and not use forking was the issue later. Okay, now that I have that, I need to have a handler function. So see, notice the compiler tells me you need a handler callback. So, okay, cool. Now I write the handler callback. And remember, the best way to write a handler or like a pointer function is to write it like a function and then go back and convert it to pointer syntax. Just like that. Once I have that, I need to sort of like pre-declare that command exists, that structure exists. And I'll be using the stats structure from lib learn see the hard way for this project. So next thing I got to do is parse the line into a command. I'm already accepting connections, so I don't really have to do much more with that. Now I just got to parse it. So I know it has to go there in client handler. What this means, though, is I have to figure out how to test this. So I have these protocols, that little protocol I need to do. So what can I do? All right, so I'm going to write out some comments with the protocol. Just like, how would the client type this to the server? And then I want mean, sample, and dump. And I add a lot more later on. I add standard deviation and delete and stuff like that. But for this video and for the interest of time, I'm just going to do 2, and you'll see. Having a hard time figuring out where I want it to live, but I'm just going to go here. Now, once I have this, I basically start creating a bunch of tag bstrings, static bstrings, so that way I can use it in the parsing. Normally when I write a server, I do a real parser, like an actual, same thing you would use for a programming language. It's the better way to do things. But in this simple example, I'm just sort of hacking up a really basic protocol where everything is separated by that line split variable. It's just a space. And then everything is just simple words with arguments. So it doesn't get much more simple than that. And that's a good way to do it. Simple is the way to do it. So I create a bunch of these. And then I also know I need certain error messages to be returned. So like I need to say okay. I need to say error. And I need to say DNE for does not exist. And I also need to say, there was one more I needed. Yeah, exists. So like if you go to create something that's already there, then there you go. And then I need a line ending. And keep in mind, I'm sort of basing this on my notes and my little quick hack. So I'm not just like, cranking this out of my head from nothing. But I did sort of more or less, do this out of my head from nothing. And while you're watching these videos, if you see me just cranking this out, just remember, I've been writing these kinds of things for a really long time. And even then, when I did my quick little spike, my quick little hack, it was rough. I hadn't coded C for a while, so I had to come back and, kind of refresh my memory on how these things work. Okay, now we follow our simple pattern. I know I need a parseLine function, so I created skeleton. And then this time, instead of trying to work it into the main program, because I have a working program, so I don't want to just start hacking parseLine into it like I did before. Now what I want to do is I want to make parseLine, then go write a test that runs it and make sure it works, and then it just seems to fall into place when I get it all working. Okay, so I want to split data on line boundaries, parse it into a command, call the command handler for that command, and destroy the splits. Pretty simple. You can describe it to yourself, then you can pretty much sit down and make it work. Okay, so I have to write a test, and parseLine does nothing. So first I'm going to set up, some simple data. And this is just stuff that I'm going to pass to it right now. It could almost just be garbage, but we're just going to make just what I need to make this parseLine function, so that way I can call unit testing on it. And then I'll use my testing to make sure that this goes a little quicker. One thing I'll say, it'll seem like this is more trouble than it's worth because I'm writing a function to test this function. But the thing is this is automated. When you're writing a server, it's really difficult to test servers. You have to run them from the command line or write sort of like scripting, like I could write Python that automates it, but it's just a lot more difficult. But if you can carve a large majority of the server out into a library and then write tests for it, then you can have the tests all automate all of your testing, or all of your testing of the components. And then you only have to use the server to just make sure they work together. Okay, just sort of getting a few things up and running. I have to put that in the header file. I think I have to also put a couple other things in the header file. Great. Setting some stuff up, and got to make sure. One thing I don't like about the MU test thing is you have to tell it where the tests are, but it's so small and nice, it's fine. Okay, it's running parse line with a really simple test, nothing fancy. Now I need to go make it work more or less. Oh, I do have to confirm that the result is what I expected it to be. So because I'm this is what you would call an integration test. I'm actually handing it the protocol and expecting a response of some kind. I'm kind of getting around all that code we wrote for handling the server stuff. So all I need to do is just make sure that this thing runs parse line and I get some sort of response, So that's what I'm doing. I give it the send RB. Notice I didn't give it a file descriptor. So the parse line only writes out into a buffer. That's all it does. And then the result, I can check wherever I want, and I can have the server take the result and send it back to the client. Well, this means I can change the server up all I want. As long as I can write from the buffer, I'm good. And I can change the parsing all I want, and I have a test that will make sure it works. And as long as they agree to this contract of using the send RB buffer to talk to each other, I'm good. I don't have to worry so much about how is the file descriptor handled inside of parseline. I don't even care. Okay, so after a bit of setup and a few little blips there, I have it checking that works. And I'm just confirming my code. Okay, now I can run it. Alrighty then. So once I have, oh yeah, this is the similar thing of what I was talking about is there was an error in my make file. So I kept having to do this, why is one part running and one and not, or why are tests running but not failing? So right now I'm sort of struggling, trying to make sure that this test should fail is my problem, and it's not failing. Because parseline does nothing, it should, yeah, I'm just struggling with issues with, there we go, see? Because I have to check that the response is null and so on. All right, so now I got to split this string on that line boundary. So the data has come in, and remember what I said, your server should be ruthless. Any deviation by the client, close it, kill it. It's fine. They can grow up and just learn to do what you tell them to. In the past, it used to be you had to be super nice to people, and then that made it so that people could basically abuse your server. So now you don't care. If they make a tiny little error, your server kills them. This makes servers a lot easier, which is what you need. Okay, so now I got a basic little, it just splits it, and that's it. So that's still working. Okay, and now I have to parse it into a command, so I'm going to make a parse command function. Remember my pattern, I write the comment, and if I know the code under that comment is going to kind of take too much code, sometimes I'll hack it in and then I'll pull it up into a function. But a lot of times I can just go, oh yeah, I need a function that does that. So then I'll work out the function, figure out what it should have, and I'll be done. Okay, that does that. And remember, call, check, that's what I do. So I'm checking that parse command works, and then I'm going to run the handler on it. But keep in mind, parse command doesn't do anything, so that should fail right there. And I'm checking all of that. And if you see me sort of bouncing around like that, it's because I'm deciding, okay, should this go here? Should that go there? How could this work? How could that work? Sometimes I have to move stuff around because I make a decision and that doesn't work anymore. Cool. Oh yeah, I'm just sort of trying to figure out why it's not running. And this is related to that make file having a bug, but eventually I figure it out. Okay. Yeah, oh yeah. So here's a debugging process. So notice I'm trying to figure out, well, okay, why is this failing? Or why is it not failing? So that ran. Because I know it should fail, or that certain outputs should change. So I'm sitting here reviewing it. Okay, well, this works. See how I'm sitting at that part of the protocol? That works. And then once I get it working, I'm like, I still scan it. Okay, so this goes there, that goes there, and so on. Okay, now I have to parse the command. And parsing the command involves splitting it, like I did before. Or yeah, no, get the command, because the command structure has the name of the command that should be run. And then I have to use an if, because, I'm using bstring. So I just do if it equals that, if it equals that. Again, a full parser would make this so much easier. Or like, maybe a linked command structure or a hash map that you set up right away that knows how to find, oh, this command goes to that, handler and so on. But this is just quick and easy. Okay, and then I'm saying, okay, I'm just going to do command at first. Now I know what these need to have, because remember I had that little protocol comment I wrote at the top, which I'm going to go refer to super quick. And I know create needs to have name and number, because that's what I said for my protocol specification. And that's in like some notes off to the right you can't really see. And then I need to set the handler to handle create, which I haven't created yet. So then I would go up and I would create that. So I'm sort of like slowly building things up. And there you see me using Sentinel to make sure that it actually bombs out when it should. If it hits that spot, it shouldn't. So that would be if I added a command, then this would make all my tests fail, and I would have to go and add that. And then I'm going to create a dummy handle create. And make sure it matches my handler callback. And notice I do this thing where I basically check, okay, did I write that one correctly? Did I write this correctly? You'll see my cursor, and I'm sort of doing it on purpose, but you'll see my cursor move up and down. I'm doing that so you can see where I'm kind of looking. But I also just sort of do it as a nervous habit, because if I didn't, then I wasn't keeping track of what I was doing. So if I was just scanning with my eyes, I was missing code. But if I scanned with my arrow keys, then I could scan each line. So it sort of checks me and makes sure that I'm going through it line by line. Now I have to fill in handle, or the handle create. So I check if it's in the data. Otherwise, I create the stats records and store it in the hash map. And then I fill in the blanks. And again, the design of this is I just have to write into the ring buffer. That's it. I don't know, I got to kick back a reply of some kind. A lot of that, like, see how I just typed that in, and then I go, no, that should be in a function. So it's sort of like I wrote that code first as kind of a note, okay, and then it has a reply. It doesn't really work. And then I go back and I'm like, okay, no, that should be in a function called send reply, because I knew I had that problem later. And you'll see I have this little spelling mistake there. That's fine. A lot of people will try to tell you that your code has to be perfect while you write code. And it might be interesting to see that I'm coding and maybe you thought I was way better than I am. I think I'm a pretty good C programmer, but maybe there's other people who are better. But one thing is, those people, you don't really see them coding. So they claim that they're really good, but until you see them actually coding stuff, you don't really know how good they are. I'm sitting here coding this pretty much just straight based on some notes I made really quick. So keep that in mind. I'm making mistakes. I'm doing things imperfectly, and that's sort of on purpose. Okay, so now I'm just tossing in a debug print so I can see what's going on. It really helps to just kind of sprinkle those around, make sure things are running. And then I do my thing. So I create a record. And notice I'm pretty religious about this sort of like, check every return value. And a lot of that is because a lot of times you just have to check return values of things. That's the way C works. And it's also the way Go works too. Interestingly enough, Go is back to the whole if statement stuff, and you can't really create, any sort of convenient syntax like I have here. I have to copy the name of that because later on, other code will clean up command, but my info stays around longer. So it's good to get, understand the discipline of who owns what code. All right, then I run my sample, and I add it to the hash map. For some reason that day I kept capitalizing the R. I'm not sure why. All over the place, capital R, probably the angle of my hand or something. And then, yep, see, capital R. Not sure why. So strange. Okay, so it's more or less kind of running. I get a seg fault. So now I got to find out why I'm getting that seg fault. So first thing I do when I have a bug like that is I scan my code line by line. See me doing it there? Okay. And then there, I check. Okay, I can't figure it out, but I'm getting sort of an overview of the path from one thing to the other. Now I fire up LLDB. And I gotta do my password. And it says it's bombing out on the hashing of the key. And it's coming in from line, it looks like parse line 134. So is it right there, I think? Yeah, inside handle create. The name is not getting made for some reason. And then I realize what's going on. So in order for this to work, I have to configure the hash map. But I'm running this from a unit test. So I had the hash map getting created in this echo server function. But that's not going to work if I want to unit test it. So that means I have to pull this out and make a function. And this is sort of an interesting thing. Sometimes the unit tests that you write help you redesign it. Sometimes they make you redesign it in a bad way, where it's just way more complicated just so you can test it with, whatever testing method you're using. But in this case, it's a good design decision because now I have this set up data store, and this becomes something important later that I use to sort of improve the design. Like I have to set up the disk that things are stored to. Now I have a function that does it. And there, now everything is working. But notice I did the same process. I found a bug. Now I rerun it under LLDB. Everything works fine, and off I go. And the debugger saves you so much time on that, or Valgrind, or any of those tools that I told you about throughout the whole thing. It's just a really nice thing to do. Instead of sitting there staring at the code, trying to figure out what it is, remember, you can't figure out what's going wrong from code. You have to get more information, either debug printing, debuggers, anything you can. All right, so now I have to write this attempt line function. And, okay, so what I'm doing here is I know I'm going to have to test like 10, 20 of these lines, all kinds of different parsing in order to make sure this server works. Now, in the videos, I don't go like crazy testing every single possible permutation and protocol and stuff like that. Instead, I just do 2. That's just for the speed of the video. In the final project, you'll see I go through and I basically test all of them, but I know I'm going to have to sit here and test, create with this, create with errors, everything. So I'm making a function that you hand it some data, almost like a script, and it just goes and does its thing. And how I did that is I grabbed the code from the test and I pulled it up into a function that I can pass data to. And you see I sort of fumble around with the design on this, like, should I have it designed that way or this way? So right now, all I'm doing is I'm just doing, I call it a pull-up. So a pull-up is where I take code from one function and I pull it up into one or more other functions, and then I sort of clean them up. Like I replace things with a variable like I have there. I make sure that stuff's destroyed. rename everything line, but then that sort of messes up the ring buffer line up there on line 12 that you can see. Yeah, see, that should be ring buffer create. So that's the danger of just doing a whole, search replace on it. But whatever, I figure it out. That's what the compiler helps me with. So now I'm going to have it just attempt that create line again, because I know that it worked and that my code is more or less doing its thing. Now I just have to make it do its thing again. Yeah, and that's a little bit better. And then I have my line. I made that mistake there. There we go. Cool. Now, IDEs will tend to do this stuff a lot quicker for you, but I just use a regular old text editor. And this makes it so I can do this. I mean, this is like not much more time. Now, I'm kind of, And the thing is, if I used an IDE to pull this up, I wouldn't, I would just use whatever the IDE created, and I wouldn't sit here and oh, that's really not good design. I'm not going to be able to do it this way. I would just pull it up and shuffle code around and not really improve code. Instead, I'm going to sit here and probably, agonize over the design a few times. Because I want to do an array of these and pass it to this function. So, eventually I come up with a design that has all the stuff, the fact that it worked, that it didn't, everything. Okay, so now I'm going to speed up the video quite a lot because this is kind of just, you can follow along if you want. I mean, remember, this isn't necessarily for you to follow along. It's for you to see how I did it, and then you can go look at the code. But I'm going to make this go a lot quicker because this is just sort of like a slog. It's a pretty, yeah, I mean, I'm basically just going through lots of different design decisions in a rapid time. So I don't want to bog the video down in this decision. Okay, so I have to have a for loop, but now I got a problem. If I have the for loop that goes through all the possible options, how do I check that they worked? So now I have to pass in some variables that tell it, well, this is how it worked. So that means I have to create a structure. So now I create a test structure, and I'm going to use an array of these instead of an array of just plain old strings, because I want to make sure I get proper responses back from the function. All right, so now I make an array of these line tests. And remember, an array of structures, I can just sit here and do this. I can just go, okay, cool, dot result, dot that. I don't have to do the thing that old school C programmers do where they do memset and they set each one. Modern C, I can actually set the variables right when I create that particular structure, and then I can do an array of them. So this is just straightforward C. I'm not really doing much. Okay, and then I'm just rolling through the tests. There's another way to do this. Instead of passing, instead of using a count or whatever, I can actually make one of the final elements in the array have an empty, say, line, or set something to null, and then when I hit null, it ends. But that means that I'm back to that old problem in C of arrays that are terminated by some sort of line. So a better way to do it is to just pass in the count. It's a little more annoying, but that's sort of what you need anyways. All right. So now I kind of shuffle some stuff around, and then make sure that I can pass that and refactor this part up so that I can go, okay, yeah, I want to make sure that the test comes out correct. I got my line, got my result. All right, and then I pass that element. Yeah, result. And that works. I think another thing is I was kind of tired when I was doing this, so it's no excuse, but you'll see me just sort of fumble around, mistype, misspell things. It's a really common thing that when you get a little too tired, it's hard to actually code. So it's good to take a break. All right, so now I'm just sort of well, I want that there. Do I want this there? I have a few issues with the massert not really working the way I want. Like I can't really pass a variable into it. It's kind of a hokey little, cheapo macro, so it doesn't really work the way I want. But it's fine. It works well enough. All right, and then yeah, see, I'm just making really common kind of dumb mistakes because I was basically working on this pretty late. Okay, so now I got that sort of tested out, and then I don't really like it, and then I'm moving around over here. Okay, that's running. Okay, so now I take it one level further. So I could have stopped right there, but why have a for loop there? I know I'm going to have to do like a test for create, a test for sample, a test for this, instead of one giant test. So now I want to pass the loop to a function. So I pull that up into another function, and then I'm good to go. And as long as that sort of like keeps working, I'm good. Nope, and I messed up that function call. It needs the count. And there's that. Oh, and then again, I keep making this mistake where I think I can pass a variable into the description, but that's bad form. The check macros are sort of designed so you can't do that because you don't want to pass user data to that format string that's there. You want to make a format string that specifies exactly what kind of data can be passed to it. And that's a common thing. So a lot of these, like the moassert and the check macro, they are designed so you can't just put a raw variable in there most of the time. But I keep doing it because it just makes sense. I should be able to do that, but I can't. All right, so now I know create works and I can do this testing. So now things get a lot easier. It's sort of a slog to make that thing work, but it pays off later because now I'm going to sit here and just write these simple kind of like scripts inside a struct, and then I'm good. And then I can just pass that to a function, and I know this will all work, and there we go. Oh, and so this is, I'm like, why doesn't this work? It should fail, so on and so forth. Like when you make a test first, I try to make it fail first. And then if it fails, I know I did it. And I go, aha, I wasn't even running the test. So I had to add it there. Okay, now that I have a test that runs sample, I go and I implement sample. All right, so and then it's pretty straightforward. I just basically keep doing this pattern. Write a test, go implement that. Write a test, go implement that. I won't do it for all of these in the video because it just becomes pretty repetitive after a while. After you get it set up, it should be, it's a paint by numbers problem after a while. It should be repetitive. It kind of makes it boring. I know a lot of people hate that. Even in painting, they hate paint by numbers. But, that's what you want to do. You want to make your job easier. Okay, so that is up there. Let me see. So now I write out comments to say what I want to do. So I'm going to get the info from the hash map. I want to say it does not exist because sample only works on things that have been created. I run sample on it with the stats option, and that's it. And then return the mean. So return means send it back with the send reply function. Okay, so now it's doing the basics. Yep, okay. And then suddenly test create stops working. I can't figure out why. And you'll see, I type arg into the code once I realized what I did. And if you're getting good, you might have seen what I did. So we'll see if you caught what I did. And it's such a common, annoying, not a common bug, but it just really drives me nuts. So what I do is I proceed to go through line by line and find out what's running and what's not. And this is where that small bug in my make file just seems to really cause me a lot of problems. And again, I'm getting tired. You know, you just got to give up when you're getting tired. I should have probably stopped, but I was trying to record this video. So, you know, normally I would just quit. I would be like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go sleep. All right, so here we go. I'm going to make clean. Why is this not running? Why is this not running? This is driving me nuts. Why does this not run? Okay, that is there. This is there. Those are there. And there we go. I forgot an else in front of the if. That's right. It was running wrong because that else clause, without that else there, it's like a second if statement. A simple formatting error caused me all this time just not being able to get that thing to run. But I broke it down line by line, made sure it worked, and added debug prints to figure out why it wasn't running. Okay, now I can go in and implement the guts. So I do the sample on it. There's my capital R for some reason. I craft my reply. I send it. Destroy it. And one thing about doing the comments is, see how I had that problem with the if statement? It was a big bug. I was sitting there just, you know, trying to get it done. It wouldn't work. With the comments there, I don't have to keep in my memory what I was doing. I just go back to this handle sample function and keep working. All right, so now I have to alter the test because I don't really know what the result is. So instead, I just run it. I get my failure. I print out what that failure was, and then I can just really quickly craft out or write out what the response should be. Remember, I'm doing this at like almost 200% speed, so yeah, I'm not really going this fast. Just keep that in mind in case you think I'm Superman. Okay, so now I know that I have that right output. What is going on? So, okay, I'm going to print it out, see what that is. Again, you can't debug by just looking at code. Print more. So I print that out. Okay, so got the wrong output. What is it doing? Now notice there's this new line down there. So what I'm missing is, because the reply added a new line, then it should work. Okay, so this is everything working in the unit test. Now I just got to drop it in. For the most part, I know that function works and does what it's supposed to. So now I got to alter the client handler to use that function to send a response. All right, so I'm taking a note. Let's see, I need a send and receive buffer. Okay. All right. I need a send and receive buffer because I'm going to receive on one end, and then I might have to make responses on the other end, and they could be asynchronous. So that's a typical pattern you have to have when you're doing, like, you know, any kind of like command response sort of server, or mostly any kind of server, really. Okay, so the echo server is sort of a basis of this. So I'm just going to use that same pattern. I need to keep reading, you know, read from the input, and then I need to sort of make it work. So here we go. And again, notice the pattern I'm using too. I do a little bit and I run it. I actually compile it so I don't have like mountains of errors at the end. Alrighty. And I replace send with one move. There we go. Okay, that compiles, but it won't work. I mean, you know, it just does nothing. So I'm just going to basically test that it does nothing. All right, doesn't do anything. Client just kind of sits there doing nothing. So now I fill in the guts of this while loop where I read everything coming in and then I write responses that come from the parsing function I just wrote. There's an interesting bug in how this processes things, and this would be solved if I switched to using select, but and like a real parser. But we're keeping it simple, just because it works better. But if someone sent if the packets of data got carved the wrong way, they might send the correct thing, but then it would seem wrong to my server. All right, so now I want to make a special function that just reads a line, because I know I have to read one line of stuff. And this would be where if I wanted later on to make the server handle more like ragged lines, I would fix it there. So I don't have to fix it in the client handler. I just fix it in how a line is read. Okay. So I just kind of put a little stake in the ground. I know I'm going to use readLine to do that. So I can just pretend it works. And then parse the line. And that makes all the stuff run and does all the things that we just did in our test. It's sort of plugged in. And I want to do a little bit of cleanup because I don't really need the data anymore at that point. So I don't want to have to do check and then make sure that it's there and juggle where that line is. So I just destroy it right after I use it. It's not optimal, but it's just sort of a quick way to do it. Okay, so now what I got to do is I got to do that read line thing. Oh yeah, and I had a pointer there instead of what I should have had. Changing up a few little variables. Okay, it compiles. Doesn't do anything though, so it shouldn't work at all. Yeah, there we go. Because the read line just returns null. Cool, that works. And again, slowly climbing the mountain. So now I got to go to read line. Oh, one thing I'll point out. Normally when I code professionally, I don't do this thing where I'm editing the files. I use a thing called cscope and ctags, and it scans all of the functions in your C code, and then I jump to them. So that's something that I did just for the videos, so you can see what file I'm editing, because the tag jumping, they call it tag jumping, it's a really common thing in IDEs and decent editors. The tag jumping was just way too fast and too magic for the video. So normally I'm not sitting here like doing E and editing files quickly. But I do, like if a language doesn't support C tags or something similar, then I just edit files directly. All right, so now I'm doing a very inefficient character by character reading out of the buffer. So I mentioned it's not very efficient. But, it's kind of sort of the only way you have to do it, to be honest. You have to have some sort of way of looking for one ending in a character. Interestingly enough, if I were to use a real parser, I wouldn't really have so much of these problems. So eventually it gets to where like handwritten parsers are more work than just sitting down and writing a real parser. And this is sort of like a little safety feature because I might have an off by one error. So I did that check there, not enough data in the ring buffer after reading the line. I did that check just to make sure that after reading one character at a time, I had the right amount left over, because there should be like at least one character left in there, because I'm reading up to the new line in theory. Yeah, and then I make a comment saying, hey, I know that this would probably fail if we get sort of a weird thing. And there's my spelling mistakes. I noticed that one now. Okay. Moment of truth. All the tests are running. In theory, this should just sort of semi-work. there we go. Oh, and while you weren't looking, I tossed in mean and all these other functions. Because for the video, I just do 2, and that's it. But I wrote off screen. I basically wrote them up, so you can see how this works. And there you go. There's me playing with it. Now, there's still bugs, obviously. Nothing is perfect, and definitely nothing is perfect in C world. But that's pretty much the gist of this section of the project. And in theory, that's pretty much done for just learning how to set this all up. But then we're going to do in the next videos, we're going to make it a little bit slicker. We're going to have some URLs, and then we're going to make it so it stores stuff. Because it's kind of useless right now. Each client that connects doesn't really get the data of other clients. So that's kind of a dumb design decision. Okay, so what I wrote is I had good testing set up here. And probably what I would do is I would have better tests, and I would round out all the CRUD operations. I would do listing and stuff. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.